Things to look for during auditions. So, I'm going to talk about a couple things here to give you a better idea of what you're looking for in terms of how to appropriately place your students. Okay, so some common trends that I've noticed over the years and highlights of things to watch out for and make sure that they're happening as you're teaching. Okay, so the first thing is going to be wrist rotation. So basically, the stick should be drawing straight lines up and down from the drum. Okay. So what you don't want is a slice happening like this. And this is assuming that you're playing on flat drums, which is, tenors or snares. You don't want your sticks coming in at an angle on a flat drum. And the same way with the left hand, if you're playing traditional or matched, you want to be drawing straight lines up and down and not, coming across or out like this as you're playing. Okay. So a couple things to think about, if you're coming out like this, then that means the hand is probably too open. And then if for some reason they're slicing inward, which is very uncommon, I would say, that means their hands probably rotated the wrong way. Okay. So the wrist rotation, check that out. The stick should come across the hands. Okay. So sticks should come across the hands as opposed to coming down the hand. A lot of beginner students want to hold their sticks like this, and it looks right because they get their fingers kind of on it, but that pinky really isn't making good contact with the stick, and it's really hard to maintain control. Okay, because later we're going to have to use fingers, and if these fingers aren't even hardly touching the stick, it's going to be hard to use those to control the stick. So the stick should be coming across the hand like this, and then make sure that when you're learning like an 8 on a hand exercise or a legato exercise, that the stick heights remain consistent. Okay. So you don't want stick heights, if you say play at 12 inches, whatever you define at 12 inches, you don't want the during the same hand playing, you don't want that height to vary. Some are 12, some are um, 9, some are 6, and it just kind of varies. Or the first note of a hand is louder than the rest of them. All the heights should be consistent across the line, and sticks should rotate primarily from the wrist, and then the hand should open up so it can rotate around the fulcrum. Okay, so your fulcrum would be right here between the index finger and the thumb finger, the thumb, not the thumb finger. And then the wrist primarily rotates the stick up. Then at a certain point, it becomes, if you want to play higher, you actually have to open up the hand so that the stick can rotate in this pivot point right here. Okay. And so that's important at any height, is just to kind of let that stick breathe and let it rotate around the fulcrum, and while the wrist is providing most of the power. If you want more detail on how that's supposed to work, you can check out the Fundamentals Fast Track, the other course that I have that goes into detail about fulcrum and how it all is supposed to come together and work together. But these are just things to watch for during auditions. So if you are playing matched grip, the left should mirror the right. So we have two sticks. I'm gonna hold them up just so the camera can see. Okay, we don't want, this or this or this. Okay, whatever the right looks like, set one, get it looking right, and then all you got to do is have the student match and mirror that and make sure they look the same. Hence why it's called match grip. Okay, think about the stick angle being 90 degrees. Okay, so you really don't want your sticks in like this because your arms are too close to your body, and it creates a position where they're using mostly wrist and they're not able to kind of use their arms for power too, which, depending on what you're doing, you definitely need to use your arms, maybe with rolls and stuff like that. You get them too wide, then their wrist becomes ineffective, right? They're playing like a more very weird German grip. So think about a 90-degree angle in the sticks, okay? And then beads half inch together, half inch apart. Or sorry, the beads half inch apart and half inch off the drum. That will be a good starting point. And if they can maintain that look throughout their playing and their stopping. That's what you want to watch out for and have them be consistent in that area. Hey guys, real quick, if you didn't know, this video is actually in one of my courses in my online community on school.com. So if you like stuff like this and you want actual help with your ensemble and your specific problems, you can join that community. I'll leave a link in the description below, and I hope to see you there. All right, so left hand traditional. You want to watch out for the hand maintaining a curved look. Okay, so I talk about this in the fundamental fast track, and you can reference that, but basically all of the fingers are curved except for the thumb. The thumb is relatively straight, and what will happen is a lot of students will have this pinky and ring finger. They'll do something crazy. They'll bring it down to where it's like straight, like this, or they will have it like straight out like this. Okay, it needs to be a nice, relaxed, curved look. The hand should be very round, like you were gripping like a doorknob, or kind of you're going in for a handshake. You wouldn't have these fingers straight out if you're going in for a handshake, nor would you have them, against your palm like this. So this is a very common thing for beginners who have never played traditional grip to do. And in marching band, it's important to define what this hand's supposed to look like so it all looks the same. It's not the same as, drum set traditional where you can play whatever you want to and it doesn't really matter. We're having to play together, and so it's important to look the same so you get the same sound out of the drum. The thumb should remain connected to the index finger, so watch out for that. A lot of students want to bring this thumb off and they want to do weird things. They want to connect it down here at the main knuckle, the second joint. It needs to be at the first joint, the first knuckle. And the ring finger and the pinky finger should come off the stick for notes of the same type. Okay, so if you're having the same kind of notes consecutively, these actually come off. They don't squeeze the stick. The only time they're going to kind of come in contact with the stick is when you stop the stick at the bottom, or maybe when they're providing a little bit of lift to start, okay, or if there's some kind of visual. But for the most part, these are not controlling the stick. They're along for the ride, and they're coming off the stick, especially when you're playing multiple eighth notes, like an 8 on the hand. You want to watch for these to come off and not be stuck on here. That means they're choking off the sound if they're stuck on, and they're not getting they're not utilizing the rebound well either, because if they're utilizing the rebound, these will come off and they will be able to get out of the way. They won't be able to hold on. This is very uncomfortable to hold on all the way up here. All right, so let's talk about tenors and quads for a second. You want to check the grip and make sure it's consistent in both hands. Okay, so I usually recommend a kind of an American grip, which is somewhere between German and French. Okay, and we want to make sure that it's consistent no matter where they're playing. Players should play within the zones. So the zones are going to be the third. If you divide each drum into thirds, the third closest to the player would be the zone that they need to play on. In quads, you may already know this, but you don't play in the center of the drum. And a lot of times, high schoolers, they have no idea. So it's important to define the zones to make sure that they are playing at the proper spot on the drums. And then if they're doing any crossovers, even if it's just the eights pattern cross, check where they're crossing. Okay, if it's one, a good rule of thumb would be that if it's one drum, you would cross at the stick or the fulcrum. Okay, so right here. If you're going 2 drums, it would be at the wrist, and if you're doing 3 drums, you would cross at the forearm. Okay, so just a kind of a general rule. It's not always exactly there, because there are times where the zone moves a little bit, and we're going to get into that in a later lesson on like advanced tenor drumming stuff. But for right now, if you're crossing, just make sure they're crossing stick, wrist, or forearm, depending on how far they're going over, and that'll give them a good reference point as to how to execute those passages. If your tenor drummers are doing any scrapes, so they're going same hand, 2 notes from drum 3 to 1 or whatever, 2 drums. If they're going like that, a lot of times drummers, they want to just flick their wrist out. They want to just not move their arm, and they just want to move their wrist across. That does not produce good sound. You need to get good sound out of both notes coming across. So double stroke roll, think 16th notes, 1E, 2E coming across the drums, 1 to 3, 1E. Okay. That does not produce good quality sound. They need to actually turn their wrist for both notes, and they need to move their arm out to the proper zone. So their arm needs to move. Their wrist pretty much stays locked in place. It doesn't rotate like this. It rotates like this, of course. But a lot of beginner drummers want to just turn their wrist out and kind of do this weird, rotation like that. For the most part, that is not desirable. And you definitely need to get your arm moving out there so that you can attack the drum, each drum the same way, from the same angle. You don't want to hit one drum coming in at a round it off and then come down and hit it with the thumb on top. That does not produce good quality sounds out of the quads. For basses, make sure before the bass drummers even play that the drums should be adjusted correctly and the players are playing in the center of the drums. So a good frame of reference would be to define the this part of the arm, your bicep, and then your forearm at a 90-degree angle. And then this would be at a 45. Okay. That should be the center of the drum, if at all possible. Now, sometimes they're going to have to pull back or go forward depending on their body size and their arm length and, to adjust for the middle, because you don't want to plan too far forward or too far back. But if you can get the height of the drum in this area so that they always can reset and they have this reference on their body, then that will be a good starting point for them. And if they can make that the center of the drum, that should be adjusted first. They're going to rotate their sticks out as well, and it should draw straight lines from pointing out to the drum. You definitely don't want it coming at a slice like this, which I've seen a lot of people do. They want to rotate and do some kind of crazy like wiping motion. Okay, the mallet should come straight in and rebound off, just like the snare drums or the quads. It's just at a different angle, and their hand is turned sideways, basically. Okay, so they're turning out like this. Think about kind of turning a doorknob is a good frame of reference to start. The last thing we'll talk about today is posture. So whenever they are standing and playing, or whenever they are marching, a couple things to check. You probably already know most of these. If you're a band director, you've been doing this for a while, but it's just a good reminder to make sure that we consistently reinforce. Okay, so the back should remain straight. The feet should remain however you define them. So I prefer, if you're looking for a preference, I prefer heels together, toes apart. Okay, so at a 45, and I prefer to mark time like that. Some groups, when they mark time, they will bring the toes in and mark, parallel. I feel like this is way more relaxed. It doesn't look too different. I've done it both ways. That's the way I prefer. However you define them, they should maintain that. And if they, vary from that, you need to correct that. Remind them to look up as much as you can, especially once they have the music memorized. Get their, not just like their eyes, because I've seen, you can do this and looking up, but they actually need to get the flats of their faces up and elevated, like they were looking at the drum major or looking at the press box. Get the performance off the field, even at auditions, right? If you can, go ahead and start talking about this stuff. The posture should be slightly forward as opposed to leaned back. This is going to translate to marching and in general. You definitely want it forward when you're marching so that you can, there's a lot of times where we're marching backwards. And if you lean back while you're marching backwards, you have less control over stopping yourself and you tend to keep going. I've seen people fall, their drums, hit them in the face. Okay, so we've got this large instrument. You've got your toes and everything to stop you when you're going forward. You don't have as much control and much to stop you. You've only got your heels, basically, if you lean back. So you want to lean forward, and you want to have that aggressive stance just slightly, right? You don't want to lean forward like Michael Jackson, like you just want to have a slightly aggressive stance, lean forward kind of on the middle or the balls of your feet. Um, even while you're standing at set or marking time or what have you. Okay, that's going to do it for this lesson. We're going to talk about some more stuff for auditions in the next one. I'll see you then.